How's it going, everyone? Happy schedule release day. This morning, the Packers schedule was released early by beat reporter Matt Schneiderman. So in today's video, I'm going to go over, react to the entire schedule, as well as break down every game for the upcoming 2023 season, which still includes 5 total primetime games, even without Aaron Rodgers, which I love. Love's first game as a full-time starter versus Chicago in Week 1. Also, the Packers are finally playing again on Thanksgiving versus Detroit. Devonta Adams returns to play the Packers for the first time in Week 5, and the reigning Super Bowl champs Kansas City Chiefs come to Green Bay in Week 13. All right, so without further ado, let's get into the schedule. All right, so Week 1 is in Chicago versus the Bears, 3:25 Central Time, September 10th. Jordan Love in his first full-time start. Obviously, he has a start under his belt against his Kansas City Chiefs a couple of years ago, but this will be his first start as a full-time starter for the Green Bay Packers, and I think this is very, very fitting for it being against the Bears. Now, the Green Bay Packers have won the last 8 and 13 out of 14 games against the Chicago Bears. Now, yes, that is mainly with Aaron Rodgers, so a lot of that really doesn't matter to this point. This is going to become a whole new rivalry. Justin Fields versus Jordan Love, or whoever the quarterbacks may end up being in the next 3 years for both teams. But I think the Bears are still in a rebuild, and I'm not a huge Justin Fields fan, but I also don't think he's terrible. I just think, he's a little bit overrated by Bears fans. I mean, if you look what he does in the passing game, it's very underwhelming, where he has, yes, a very good runner, but I still think he needs to become a very good passer for him to be in the conversation as one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. As for the Bears' key adds during this offseason, obviously they traded down from pick number 1, and that included a plethora of draft picks plus DJ Moore. They also added Tremaine Edmonds at linebacker, also linebacker TJ Edwards, who was recently on the Eagles, former Badger, and they added former Packer Robert Tonyan at tight end. During the draft, we saw the Bears at pick number 9, then trading down, passing up on Jalen Carter, basically giving him to the Eagles for a 4th-round pick. So that's going to be very interesting. They selected Darnell Wright, which I do like the pick. I think it's a little bit early there, but I love Darnell Wright, and I think he will do well as a tackle for the Bears there. But that'll be something to monitor over the next 5 to 7 years, the difference between Darnell Wright legacy and Jalen Carter's there in Philadelphia. They also added Jervon Dexter, defensive tackle, Tyreek Stevenson, cornerback, Zach Pickens, another defensive tackle, running back Rashawn Johnson, and receiver Tyler Scott throughout the draft. I'm super hyped for this game. It's the oldest rivalry in the NFL, and it's a dawn of a new era. Jordan Love versus Justin Fields. I'm so ready for this, and I do think Jordan Love gets his first W as a first-time full starter for the Green Bay Packers in Chicago Week 1. On to Week 2, the Packers are on the road yet again versus the Atlanta Falcons, a 12 p.m. game on September 17th. So, the Packers start a little bit, rough. 2 games on the road for a brand new quarterback. This Falcons team is intriguing. If Desmond Ridder is the real deal, look out for the Atlanta Falcons. They look very, very good on paper, and I know that doesn't mean everything, but their roster is super, super talented, and that division is wide open. As for the key adds for the Atlanta Falcons, they added Chris Lindstrom at guard, Caleb McGarry at tackle. They traded for Jonnu Smith, added David Onyemata at defensive tackle, Jesse Bates at safety, Scotty Miller, wide receiver, Calais Campbell, defensive lineman, and traded for Jeffrey Okudah. I think the Falcons added a lot of talent in this offseason. Then circling to the draft, Bijan Robinson at pick 8. I think that was an excellent pick, an excellent fit. The Falcons want to run the ball a lot, and I think Bijan Robinson was easily the best option for them to run that offense. They also drafted Matthew Bergeron tackle, Zach Harrison edge, and Clark Phillips at cornerback. I really liked the Falcons offseason. Like I said, they have a great roster on paper. The Packers won the last 2 games versus the Falcons, but have lost the last 3 that have been in ATL, which this one is as well. And I think this team very well depends on the play of Desmond Ridder, but I think he has a decent year, and with the talent around him, I think the Falcons do as well, and I see the Packers' first loss here in Week 2. Week 3, the Packers get their first home game at 12 p.m. September 24th versus the New Orleans Saints. Saints are an interesting team as well. I feel like that whole division is pretty interesting. It's kind of up in the air right now. Their key adds, obviously, Derek Carr. They had Jamal Williams. I'm surprised the Lions didn't retain him. Love Jamal Williams. And also Bryan Edwards at wide receiver. During the draft, they drafted Brian Brzee, Isaiah Foskey showing up that front 7 on defense, Kendre Miller at running back. Who knows what happens with Alvin Kamara. They added Nick Saldiveri at tackle from Old Dominion. Really liked him in this draft. And also Jake Haener at quarterback. I think the Saints are a pretty good team. I don't think they're a playoff team, but I think they're an average team for this next coming season. I think the biggest question is, what Derek Carr will they get? If Derek Carr plays at, a high level like he has in years past, or a very low level like he has in years past, it's a very big scale there for Derek Carr, so it really depends on him on how the Saints will do this year. But I do think the Packers could come out with a win here. I think they get a couple turnovers on Derek Carr. That team is still going to be, transitioning into a Derek Carr-led offense, whereas, the Packers are also transitioning to a Jordan Love-led offense, but he's been there for 3 years, so it's a little bit different there. I think the Packers get a win here in Week 3. Week 4 versus the Lions, a very short week. They get their first primetime game, Thursday Night Football, 7:15 Central Time, September 28th. Like I said, very short week, but at least it's back-to-back home games. They're staying at home versus the Saints, and then they have a short week, Thursday Night Football versus the Lions. I think the Lions have a very, very solid team. I like what they're doing there with Dan Campbell at head coach. Key adds this offseason, they added David Montgomery at running back, traded DeAndre Swift to the Eagles. I do like that trade for the Eagles there. Added Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, really liked him. I wish the Packers would have made a run at Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Also brought back Marvin Jones at wide receiver and added cornerback Cam Sutton. During the draft, definitely had a very interesting draft day one. Definitely the two wow picks during the first round, Jahmyr Gibbs at pick 12, and then also Jack Campbell in the first round as well. Two guys that, are good players, but I think they kind of reached a little bit. Jahmyr Gibbs I had going in the first round, but like late 20s, where it's like they got him at pick 12. They got their guy. I understand it. Jack Campbell can be, an anchor of that defense at inside linebacker. I thought they did really good in day 2, adding Sam Laporta. Brian Branch was actually the trade with the Green Bay Packers at 45, so that'll be something to monitor over the next, 5 years, the difference between Brian Branch and Jayden Reed. So the Packers, I really love that pick in Jayden Reed, but in theory, if they stayed put, they could have had Brian Branch at safety. He's more of a nickel corner though. They added Brian Branch, then they also added Hendon Hooker. Love that pick. I think Jared Goff is the guy, but having Hendon Hooker in that room as well for the future, I think is an awesome move by the Lions, and Broderick Martin at defensive tackle. I think Jared Goff is extremely underrated. I thought he had a great year last year, and I think he has a good year this year as well. And if he does replicate that, I think the Lions definitely are a playoff team. This is a short week. The Lions are a good team. I think this is a loss here for the Packers. Week 5, another primetime game. They head to Las Vegas to play the Raiders. Monday Night Football, 7:15 Central, October 9th. This is essentially a mini bye. You're going from Thursday, skipping that weekend, and then all the way to the next Monday. So kind of a mini bye here, and this is going to be the first time Davante Adams is playing the Green Bay Packers. So very interested to see, how he plays versus that Packers defense, and if Jair shadows him all game, which I will love. I would just love to see an entire game, Jair versus Davante Adams. I think that'll just be like peak TV and just peak entertainment in general. I'm very interested in the Raiders, the transition of this football team. Will Jimmy G be the guy? Their key adds, Jimmy Garoppolo, Jacoby Myers, O.J. Howard, Austin Hooper. They traded away Darren Waller to the Giants, and they also added Marcus Epps. During the draft, they got Tyree Wilson. Really liked that pick at edge rusher there. They drafted Michael Mayer, so they really rebuilt this tight end room, adding O.J. Howard, Austin Hooper, and drafting Michael Mayer after getting rid of Waller. So really like them rebuilding that tight end room after trading Waller. They also drafted Byron Young, the defensive tackle, Trey Tucker at wide receiver. It was kind of a question mark there at that pick out of Cincinnati. I think a little early for him. Ja'Cory Bennett at cornerback, and then also Aiden O'Connell they added at quarterback. Honestly, I don't see the Raiders doing too great this year. I feel like Jimmy G is kind of like a game management quarterback, and he's not going to go out there and wow you or really win games for you. So it's really going to come down to the Raiders defense, which is okay, and the running game, which, they did tag Josh Jacobs, and he's a very solid running back. But I just see the Raiders kind of, being average this year. This is a mini bye for the Green Bay Packers. They're going to have plenty of rest and time to game plan for this game, so I see a win here for Green Bay. Week 6 is the Packers bye week, and man, I hate early bye week. This is a very early bye. It sucks because it's right after their quote-unquote mini bye with the Thursday night all the way to the Monday night, as I was just talking about. I wish the bye was more around week 10 or 11 where it actually benefits the teams a lot more, but it is what it is. Week 7, they head to Denver to play the Broncos at 3:25 Central on October 22nd. I do see a bounce-back year for Denver this year. The Sean Payton addition, I think, will drastically change this football team, especially that offense. Their key adds during the offseason, they added a really nice tackle in Mike McGlinchey, linebacker linebacker Alex Singleton, Zach Allen, defensive end, and Samaj Piran, a nice, rotational running back there. During the draft, they didn't have many picks due to that Russell Wilson trade a year ago, but I thought they did decent in the picks they had. They added Marvin Mims, a nice receiver I like, Drew Sanders at linebacker, Riley Moss, super athletic, rangy cornerback, and also J.L. Skinner, I thought was excellent value there at the end of the draft. I honestly thought the Broncos had a pretty good offseason and did the best with what they had. Obviously trading for essentially Sean Payton, I think is going to do them wonders with the team, the roster and team that they have. I think they'll be way better than the 5-12 record they had last year. Will they be a playoff team? I don't know. That division with the Chargers and Chiefs, that's going to be very hard. But like I said, I think they'll be way better than that 5-12 record, and I think they do beat the Packers here at home in Denver. Week 8, a divisional game for the Green Bay Packers at home versus the Vikings, 12 p.m. Central, October 29th. First time they're playing the Vikings all the way at week 8 here. I could see the Vikings not being a good team this year. I could see them regressing, and they weren't really a good team last year either. Possibly even below the Green Bay Packers in the division. I could see the Lions winning this division and the Packers being maybe second or third, and the Vikings possibly being below the Packers. They cut both Eric Kendricks and Adam Thielen, two veterans on offense and defense. I understand the Adam Thielen thing. I don't understand them cutting Eric Kendricks at all. They didn't do too much in free agency either. It's not like they brought back in more talent to kind of, dissipate that. They added Byron Murphy, who's an okay cornerback in the slot there. Marcus Davenport, overpaid defensive end, and Dean Lowry. We all know about Dean Lowry. They're likely to move on from Dalvin Cook, who I think was their staple on offense. And if Kirk Cousins doesn't have a very good running game, I think we're going to see the normal Kirk Cousins we're used to seeing. Their draft was okay. They only had 6 total picks, so they didn't really get a ton of guys. Jordan Addison, a receiver, I think was overvalued in the first round. Small receiver. I think he'll have a good career. I just think, obviously, playing next to Justin Jefferson will help, and I think Jordan Addison will have a solid career. I'm not calling him bad by any means. I just think he's a little bit overvalued there in the first round. They also had Mekhi Blackman at cornerback and Jay Ward. So clear as day that they have a big need at cornerback, and I think teams will be able to pass all over them. And I think Jordan Love will have a good day in this game, and I think the Packers take away a win in Green Bay here. Moving on to Week 9 versus the LA Rams, a 12 p.m. game yet again on November 5th. This is back-to-back home games for the Packers. Interested to see how the Rams do and if Matthew Stafford returns to his former self. And if he does, I see the Rams being good again. I feel like a couple years ago, the 49ers kind of went through something similar where they had a ton of injuries and they just played horrible and then they bounced right back. I could see the Rams doing that, but that division, of course, is loaded with the Seahawks and 49ers and even the Cardinals, which I don't see the Cardinals doing too well this year. But I do see the Rams definitely bouncing back from last year. I think last year was certainly an off year, and I think they're still a good team. But what does hurt them, they basically did nothing in free agency. Like, they had no money, so they basically did nothing. And they also didn't have that many draft picks. They had Steve Avila, Brian Young, the Edge, Kobe Turner, and Stetson Bennett. I like those 4 picks, but I feel like their offseason very underwhelming. But they didn't really have much to work with there. I still see them doing better than last year because last year was a 5-12 season. I could see them as like a 7 or 8 win team. That division is a dogfight though, and I could honestly see Green Bay beating them. I could see Green Bay getting back-to-back wins here in Week 9 against the Rams. Week 10, the Green Bay Packers are back on the road in Pittsburgh versus the Steelers. Another 12 p.m. game, November 12th. I really like Pittsburgh. I see them as a big sleeper team. I think Kenny Pickett has a big sophomore jump. I really liked what I saw from him late last season. I think he has a big jump in his sophomore year here. Kenny Pickett and that whole offense with Najee Harris, Pickens as well. I thought they had an excellent offseason, the Pittsburgh Steelers, both in free agency and the draft. Their key adds, Larry Ogunjobi, Patrick Peterson, Cole Holcomb, Nate Herbig, the guard, Isaac Sumalo, the guard, and their draft. I mean, I absolutely love their draft. It might be my favorite draft that's not the Green Bay Packers. Like, obviously I love the Packers draft, and that's because I'm a Packers fan and a little bit of a homerism there, but outside of them, the two Pennsylvania teams, which is where I'm from, which is a little bit annoying because Eagles fans are annoying. Pittsburgh, I'm a little far away from, but I think they both had excellent drafts. The Pittsburgh Steelers got Broderick Jones in the first round, and then in the second round, the first pick, Joey Porter Jr. fell all the way into their laps. Just a perfect fit for the Steelers. And I feel like that guy is value in the 20s of the first round. So excellent pick there. Keanu Benton, Their next pick, excellent value at defensive lineman. Then Darnell Washington, who fell due to some potential knee issues. Again, if he turns out to what we expected from him, excellent pick there. And then Nick Herbig, another, Wisconsin player. They got 2 front 7 guys from Wisconsin, Benton and Herbig, to add to TJ Watt. So they're really just making a Wisconsin front 7 there over in Pittsburgh. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers will be a playoff team, and I think they beat Green Bay here. Week 11, the Packers are back at home versus the LA Chargers. Another 12 p.m. game. A lot of 12 p.m. games this year. November 19th. The Chargers were 10-7 last year. Breakdown versus the Jaguars in that wild card game. Just still kind of questioning how that happened. And the Chargers have really yet to take the next step as a football team. They haven't really taken that next step to be a great football team. They've been a good football team, but they haven't been great. They did add a couple good players in free agency with Eric Kendricks. Again, don't know why the Vikings cut him, but good job on the Chargers getting that talent on defense. And they also added tackle Trey Pipkins. Then in the draft, they added Quentin Johnston, which was a little bit of a head scratcher for me because he kind of is very similar to Mike Williams. But I guess if you can have 2 Mike Williams, why not? But I kind of thought they'd try to more so replace Keenan Allen type of wide receiver. But they went Quentin Johnston, who that guy reaches his potential. I mean, the size to speed ratio, I think, is just ridiculous. They went Tuli Tuipulotu, edge, in the second round. They also added Dayan Henley at linebacker, Darius Davis at wide receiver, and Jordan McFadden at the guard. I think a pretty solid draft and an average offseason, nothing crazy. And I still think they'll be a playoff team this year. And I think they will beat the Packers in this game, even though it's in Lambeau. The Chargers are a better team than the Green Bay Packers. And obviously all this just depends on how Jordan Love plays. The Packers still have a very talented roster, but it's a big question mark. It's how will Jordan Love play? If he goes out there and lights it up, all these predictions probably change. But based off of right now, I do see a loss here versus the Chargers in Week 11. Week 12 is the Thanksgiving game in Detroit versus the Lions. Finally, the Packers are back on Thanksgiving. This is 11:30 game, so the early game here on Thanksgiving. The last time they played on Thanksgiving was 2013, and every year since, I was like, man, I just wish the Packers were back on Thanksgiving. I love the days. You have Brett Favre, even Aaron Rodgers on Thanksgiving, mainly Brett Favre, Donald Driver, that sort of thing. So against the Lions, really, really did miss that. So regardless of the outcome of this, I'm just going to be happy to watch the Packers on Thanksgiving, and happy the Packers still have this many primetime games without Aaron Rodgers. And as I said earlier, Lions are a good team, but I do think the Green Bay Packers split them this year. I think the Lions are a better team than the Packers for this upcoming season. Obviously with the Packers, whole new regime and quarterback, but I think they still split them. I think that definitely does happen. And since I had them lose earlier in this season for this schedule, that means the Packers would get a win here on Thanksgiving. Week 13, the Packers are back home versus the Kansas City Chiefs. This is a Sunday night football game, so back-to-back primetime games. This is on December 3rd. This will actually be Love's second start versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, we saw that one start a couple years ago when Rodgers had COVID, so Jordan Love had to start there, and it didn't really go well, even though if you look at the stats, he outplayed Patrick Mahomes, but, it still didn't go too well. Chiefs defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo sent the house at Jordan Love pretty much every play, and it really flustered him, so I'm hoping he'll learn from that, and if it happens again, they'll have a good game plan against that, but I expect the same. I expect Spagnuolo just to send the house at Jordan Love, and obviously, a lot of this could change because it's week 13 and they'll have a lot of, tape on Jordan Love and see how he's been playing during the year. So their approach may be completely different, but the Chiefs are still the best team in the NFL. Key adds this offseason, Jawan Taylor and Mike Edwards. Loved those two signings. And then in the draft, I also love their draft. I feel like the Chiefs just keep getting better. I don't know how they keep getting away with this. Drafting Felix Anudike Uzoma, a guy I really liked, and Rashee Rice, another guy I really liked. They added two of my draft crushes. Then they drafted Wanya Morris, a nice tackle, Shamari Connor, cornerback, and BJ Thompson at edge. Love their draft. I think this is an obvious loss for the Packers here in week 13. Week 14, they head to New York, another primetime game. 3 primetime games in a row for the Green Bay Packers, and they don't have Aaron Rodgers. That's actually pretty wild. This is a 7:15 game, of course, December 11th. The Giants surprised me last year, to be honest. I didn't expect them to even make the playoffs, and yeah, the NFC was very weak, and they made it at 9-7-1, but they still went to the playoffs and beat the Vikings, but then obviously got smoked by the Eagles in the division round. But I think Brian Daboll is doing a great job, and I like what he's bringing to the Giants. I feel like they haven't really had that for a long time, and I really like what Brian Daboll's doing. Their key adds in the offseason, they traded for Darren Waller, like that ad for Danny Jones, another speedy target type of tight end across the middle. I feel like they've been missing, a solid tight end for a while here. They added Bobby Okereke, Paris Campbell, and Rakeem Nunez-Roches. I like their signings in the offseason, and also during the draft. I loved their draft. They added Deontay Banks in the first, which is just an excellent corner. I think he had a 10.0 RES. John Michael Schmitz, covers a big need on the offensive line for the Giants here. Jalen Hyatt fell, a guy I really like. The Packers passed up on for Jayden Reed. We'll see how that turns out. I love Jayden Reed, by the way, but I've said it multiple times now that I've done my research on him. But I also did like Jalen Hyatt, but we'll see how that turns out in the future years, which receiver ends up being better. And then they also added Eric Gray at running back. I thought they had a great draft. I see them improving on their 9-7-1 record. I could see them as a 10 or 11 win team this season, but obviously I still think the Eagles own that division. I think this is a close game, a very close game actually, but the Giants come out on top, maybe like a game-winning field goal. Week 15 versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Green Bay. Back to the 12 p.m. game. This is on December 17th. The Buccaneers are definitely in a rebuild. Baker Mayfield is likely their quarterback one, who's decent, but I still think the Bucs are in a rebuild. Their key adds, really just Baker Mayfield. I guess Chase Edmonds you could add into that group, but nothing really big in free agency. During the draft, they got Kalijah Kancey, Cody Mock, two picks I really liked for them, Yaya Diaby and Servaka Dennis at linebacker. I don't see them really as a competitive team this year, and in my opinion, I think this is a win for Green Bay. Week 16, they head to Charlotte to play the Carolina Panthers, another 12 p.m. game the day before Christmas, December 24th. I'm very interested in Bryce Young's career. They gave up a lot to get him, so all eyes are going to be on him for like the next 3 years, and they should be. But I think they did a great job at adding talent to this team to surround Bryce Young. I think they had a very nice offseason. They had a lot of adds and free agency. They added Miles Sanders, which I think will help that offense with Bryce Young, Von Bell, Shai Tuttle, Hayden Hurst. They signed Adam Thielen after the Vikings cut him. They added Bradley Bozeman, DJ Chark, Henry Anderson, and Julian Love. They added a lot of talent in the free agency. Then during the draft, obviously they added Bryce Young, loved their second round pick, and Jonathan Mingo. A lot of people loved Mingo and wanted the Packers to draft him, kind of that A.J. Brown type of wide receiver. They also added DJ Johnson in edge, and then Chandler Zavala at guard. They lost DJ Moore, obviously, in that trade, but I think they added a lot of wide receiver talent back to really help them with Mingo, Thielen, and Chark. So I'm happy with them at least trying to replace that. And I think adding those three will do well. I think Young has a decent rookie year, likely tops the 7 wins they had last year. And I see a close game here, but instead of the close game against the Giants and a loss, I see a close game and a win here in week 16 versus the Panthers for Green Bay. Week 17, they play the Vikings again, this time on the road in Minnesota. This is again a primetime game, Sunday Night Football, 7:20 Central Time, December 31st, New Year's Eve. And although I did say I see the Vikings regressing and I had them as a win on their first game, they typically split them every year. So I'm going to give Green Bay a loss here on the road versus the Vikings in week 17. Division games are tough regardless, even if the team is really bad and your team's really good. Division games are always tough, so I have them splitting the Vikings. Final game of the season, they started against the Bears, they ended against the Bears. This time, obviously, in Lambeau. The time is to be determined because obviously they can flex that week 18 game. I have Green Bay winning in week 1, and I actually have them sweeping the Chicago Bears with Jordan Love, so without Aaron Rodgers. I still have the Packers sweeping the Chicago Bears. I feel like that roster just is not a good roster. The Packers have a much better roster than the Chicago Bears. If we're putting quarterback to the side, if you look at the roster alone, the Packers have a much better roster than the Bears. This is at home. I think Jordan Love is a better quarterback than Justin Fields, and I think he outplays Justin Fields this year. And I think the Packers sweep the Chicago Bears yet again, giving the Packers a send-off win in Lambeau here. Now, with all those predictions, that would put the Packers at 9-8. I don't think that's good enough to make the playoffs, and I don't see the Packers as a playoff team. Yes, they could surprise us and maybe sneak in as a 6 or a 7 seed, but let's face it, this is the first year of Jordan Love. It's not just going to be, oh wow, the Packers are back to playoff contention. And Jordan Love very well could have a very nice season, but he could also have a very subpar season. But that surely isn't going to define him. Aaron Rodgers didn't make the playoffs his first year as a starter, and obviously we see what he turned into. Not saying that's going to be Jordan Love, but if the Packers miss the playoffs and even have a negative record this year, it doesn't define Jordan Love, and it doesn't define the Green Bay Packers. They're going to be growing as a team, building that chemistry under Jordan Love, under Matt LaFleur. So I think 9-8 is a fair record prediction. It could also be the other way around at 8-9 or even at 7-10. Overall, I think it's a pretty favorable schedule for the Green Bay Packers. Yes, there's some really good teams they're playing, but there's also some very average teams I think they're playing. And in terms of travel, the Packers have the second least miles to travel schedule. Only 11,956 total miles to travel. The Cincinnati Bengals are slightly lower than that by, like 15 miles. So the Packers pretty much don't have to travel too much this year, whereas like a Seattle Seahawks, who have to travel the most, are at 31,000 miles compared to Packers 11,000. So that definitely benefits the Packers. They don't have to travel too much, and Jordan Love can spend a lot of time game planning for the upcoming opponent. But that does it for my super early Packers schedule reaction and breakdown. I want to know your thoughts down in the comments below. Let me know what you predict their record to be. Obviously, this is super early. It's before OTAs, training camp. We haven't seen what Jordan Love is going to be. I know I keep saying that, but it's true. Let me know down in the comments what your record prediction is for this schedule. But that about does it for this video. I appreciate everyone watching. If you stuck around this long, I really appreciate it if you went down and clicked the like button. And of course, if you're new here, everything Packers on this channel. Go down and click that subscribe button if you are interested. But I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching, and as always, go Pack Go.